Hey, John, how are you?
Hi, Elliot. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. So yesterday I saw that FinCEN posted a supplemental advisory on identifying and reporting human trafficking. I think this updates something they put out about 6 years ago in 2014. Did you get a chance to take a look at that?
I did see it, and one thing I always forget to reference, but I think it's pretty important when advisories are issued. They list up front that the advisory should be shared with, and it says the typical places: chief risk officers, BSA departments, MSBs, legal departments. But they also focus on CEOs and chief operating officers, and I think sometimes, and chief risk. We sometimes forget that compliance needs to see these things and plug them in and all of that. But the top of the house needs to understand sort of the scope of what AML has become. And I think human smuggling and trafficking as reportable offenses are clearly one of those areas.
I agree. It is one of that education or knowledge is part of the tone from the top that's so critical for overall culture of compliance.
You're right. That's right. And again, they were pretty early on with the 2014 original guidance that they issued, and that became a pretty important tool for institutions, particularly in training and other spaces, but also to call this area out. And that was before the SAR was amended to include a box for human trafficking, which does now exist. But this particular advisory goes through a number of, as we know, typologies and red flags. And I think some of the red flags, they're not generic, but they seem to reference activities that could be other crimes, right?
Yeah, I noticed that a number of them, particularly in connection with where a trafficked individual might be taken to a financial institution and be within sight of customer-facing staff, those red flags felt an awful lot and looked an awful lot like the same list you'd have for elder abuse. A person who's really controlling another person, not letting them speak. But in addition to getting this to the top of the house, getting this to training and pushing out some of these ideas and reminders to customer-facing staff, because many of the people who are the subject of human trafficking, they're going to give you visual cues. They may look malnourished. They may look like they've been mistreated. They may be very fearful and exhibit those kinds of things. So there's a bunch of behavioral items here that really are better detected by front of the house customer-facing folks before patterns of transactions get to an FIU.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the other part that sort of continues to show that criminals adjust with what's going on in the market is a section in the advisory on alternative payment methods, and showing that traffickers don't just use cash. They go with prepaid cards, convertible virtual currency. There's actually a case study on funnel accounts, talks about that. FinCEN has also identified transactions where these human traffickers have used third-party payment processing. So to sort of understand that, it's not surprising that traffickers are using alternative payment methods, but it's always good to reference that so there's no one in the institution that says, well, it's not being done any other way but cash or checks or something like that.
Right. I was a little surprised to see that they also referenced the fact that bulk cash transfers are still happening. I remember 25 years ago, the pictures of bundles of cash in big boxes that were supposed to be diapers and things like that. But apparently that is still happening. I think it's happening much more through the alternative payment methodologies that you talked about. But bulk cash is still around.
Right. And the last thing real quick, in terms of once you identify the activity as potentially human trafficking or smuggling, in terms of filing the SAR, I talked to somebody in the anti-trafficking space who called this out specifically, and that its institutions should provide all the available information in the SAR form of the narrative, yes. But a potential victim of human trafficking shouldn't be reported as the subject of the SAR. Rather, all available information of the victim should be in the narrative. So reminding them to fill it out that way, it becomes easier for investigators and analysts to track.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Writing SARs about this kind of stuff can be a little tricky. So I thought that was a good call out and a good point that they made in the supplement.
So take a look at it. It's FinCEN 2020-A008 on October 15th, 2020. And I think plug it into your training, get it in front of your CEO and your board, and go from there.
All right. Have a good week, John. Stay safe.